This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Well, hi there, everyone. So glad you're here. I'm Jim Ervin, and this is Time Signatures. Each week on Time Signatures, I do my level best to bring you the absolute best musicians in the blues. And I have to tell you, I think we hit a home run with today's guest. In fact, I know we did. Today's guest was born into a musical family in rural Tennessee, and he grew up immersed in music. His father was a blues man and a Navy man, and his mother was a gospel singer. Now, music was not something he pursued, at least initially, but divine providence took the wheel when he and his friend created a college project, a self-produced LP entitled I Sing the Blues. This project inadvertently launched his musical career, and what has followed is nothing short of amazing. He has toured across the globe, releasing 20 albums, earning 2 Grammy nominations, and winning 4 San Diego Music Awards. Now, as we record this in the month of June, we are also celebrating Pride Month, and our guest is perhaps the only openly gay man in the genre. There's so much more here to talk about, but I want to hear these stories from the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pride to welcome Earl Thomas Bridgman to Time Signatures. How are you, my friend?
Hello, and thank you. I'm impressed with your intro. You did your homework, man.
I try to do my
I'm
homework.
impressed.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Now, listen, we have to talk, Earl. You've been quoted as saying, I have never tried to hide the fact that I'm a gay man, quote unquote. And it goes on from there. I've never made a bold, declarative statement like this previously, but I respect you so much for just being who you are. And I am also an openly gay man, happily married for almost 5 years to my husband, Garrett. People have heard me refer to him. But you said you've been out your entire life, and I was late to the party, so to speak. So what kind of support did you have from your family at home?
Well, first of all, let me say something before I tell you about that.
Sure.
I saw an interview with Maya Angelou and James Baldwin. And Maya asked James Baldwin about his homosexuality. And James had the most definitive, he had such an excellent response. I wanted to share that with you.
Sure.
In relation to the question that you just asked me. He said, and I quote, "That is such a tedious question." It is so tedious because it has absolutely nothing to do with my expression as an artist or a singer, in his case, a writer. And I say for myself, in my blues or my music expression, that's the least important of the things. True, I have never hidden the fact that I am a homosexual. I prefer the term homosexual as to gay, but that's another story. I've never hidden that, but I also don't parade with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't enter the room
Absolutely
with this on the table any more than my counterparts would enter the room waving the heterosexual flag. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, and as the saying goes, your sexuality does not define you as a musician or as a person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And my songs, the songs that I write, have no connection to that. So that's a totally separate, unimportant part of my being. Now, how is it that I'm so comfortable with myself in this way? Which I hate that it's even discussed in that manner of I'm comfortable with myself. I'm no more uncomfortable or comfortable than, again, my counterparts in their however they define themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But this comes up. So when it comes up, I say, I had extraordinary parents. My parents, unbeknownst to me, as my father told me, that we knew you were gay when you went to kindergarten. And they decided that they were going to just let me be me and insist, in fact, that I be myself. At the same time, they taught me to have a level of self-confidence that has carried me throughout my life, from the time I was a toddler in the sandbox until now. I have a level of self-confidence, not a narcissistic type of confidence, but just a genuine self-confidence. I know who I am and I know what I am. And I walk tall, as my father would always say. You walk tall and you see every man eyeball to eyeball. So, and I know that I have, in this blues business, I have the respect of my peers. They all know who the tough kid on the playground is. They all know.
Now, we got to step back here. I saw a video of you recently doing a little presentation, and you told the story about your mom and the lesson you got to share this, man. I'm begging you, please.
Okay. All right. So speaking about, the whole gay thing. All right. So I've been with my man 27 years.
Congratulations.
8 years. And we married as soon as the law was changed. But before that, I had taken him back to Tennessee to visit my family, who absolutely adore him. Anyway, so Michael and I were sitting at the dining table talking. My dad was in his chair in the living room, and he overheard our conversation. Now, this is when Michael and I first met. So this was about 25 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
He shared with me that he had come out of the closet at 33 years old. And I said, oh, wow. What was that like? I never had that experience. I said, I've always been myself. From behind the newspaper, my dad said, oh, that's because we knew you were gay when you went to kindergarten. And I mean, it was just like, like the thing, and I was like, what, really? He goes, oh yeah, your mom and I talked about it. And the thing is, the way he said it, he could have said, we have a kid that's cross-eyed or is dyslexic or has a club foot.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? And then he shared with me that my mom said, I love imitating my mom when I tell this story. My mom said, well, I guess we just have to send his little sissy ass out on the playground and never let him run from a fight. And for those that don't speak Southern, I guess we'll have to send his little sissy ass out on the playground and never let him run from a fight. And then and when he told me that, I remembered an incident where my mom had seen me run from this kid who kind of bullied me a bit, but I never wanted to fight. I tried to avoid it. But anyway, she saw me run from this kid. And I got to the house and my mom came in my room and she called me outside. And I thought she was going to tell this guy, Alan Enderby was his name. I thought she was going to tell Alan to leave me alone. We get out to where Alan was. My mom's standing there. And what she actually did was she said to me, fight him. Like that. And she said it with the tone of voice that the mothers have a tone of voice that you just know they mean business. This is like, when I say stop, I mean stop right now. It's not like it's not going to debate, right? So she turns to me and she says, fight him. And I was like, what? No, I don't want to. But I also knew that if I didn't do as she said, there would be consequences for that. And the consequences would be much worse than anything this kid could throw at me. So I put up my dukes. And when he saw that I was willing to fight, he actually turned and ran from me. And what I gained from that experience, what I learned that day, is that really I don't have to be afraid of anyone. And in that bit that you saw, I said to the audience, as a matter of fact, I ain't scared of none of y'all today. So that was a very valuable lesson that my mom taught me. And my dad also, he had a saying, don't start no shit and don't take none. And that was like the way I was brought up, my brothers as well. And again, the gay homosexual thing was never, it just was never discussed. And when I was going in high school, for example, I was just the gay kid in the little group of guys that I ran with. You know, they didn't treat me any differently than anyone else, and I didn't treat, you know what I mean? It was kind of like that movie Fried Green Tomatoes. Did you ever see that movie?
Yep, sure did.
Or Fannie Flagg, a great book, by the way, by Fannie Flagg. You know, clearly Iggy and Ruth were two gay women, but nobody seemed to notice, you know? And so, and that's how it was with me. My family, my entire family, aunts, uncles, brothers, cousins, everybody, you know, knew, and nobody cared. And I just I was fortunate enough to grow up with that viewpoint. And
because
it was
a lot
it was
of
a
kids
strong
today,
viewpoint. The other viewpoint couldn't break through. They couldn't break through.
Right. Yeah, a lot of kids today don't have that luxury, if you will, of having supportive parents like that. Well, Earl, I want to flip the page back just a little bit here. I kind of want to go back to the beginning with you and talk about your earliest memories of music and just take a different direction here. Well,
I'm certain that my mother was listening to Etta James when I was in the womb. Okay. But I was born into a musical family, a family wherein everyone either sings and or plays a musical instrument, whether it be piano, bass, drums, sings, very musical, and would be considered by the outside looking in as talented, naturally talented, because they could play so well. But music was not something that we used as any type of grandizement. Like, we weren't looking for accolades.
Right.
And now in my mature years, I realized that what we did with music was, this is how we stayed connected to each other and to our ancestry in Africa. This was the one link that did not get broken by slavery. Because I should mention that my family in Pikeville, Tennessee, I'm a direct descendant of those slaves. There's been no mixing of DNA, because Pikeville, my hometown, is very remote, and you know, it's in the Sequatchie Valley and the Blue Ridge Mountains. So it's not like, you know, a lot of traveling salesmen and people were coming through town,
right.
You know. So the slaves that were brought there in 1795 are the people that you know, trickle down made me. And then I did a DNA test where I discovered through the DNA test that my paternal and maternal families were both musical in Africa, especially on my father's side, the paternal, very musical. And I can't think of the name of the tribe. I could look it up, but that particular tribe in West Africa was known for their music making and for their warrior strength. They were great warriors and they were great musicians. And when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that explains so much. I mean, because my father and his brothers could make music all night and just unbelievable music, and they would fight like fucking devils. I mean, they would really fight. It was like fighting was part of their whole trip, and I thought it made so much sense. Oh, and one other thing. So when I found this tribe online, they showed a musical instrument. It looked like a cowbell. It looked like two cowbells connected by a curved bar. And I said, I had a toy. When I was like 2 years old, I played with a toy that looked like this thing.
Oh, wow.
And it sparked a memory. It was amazing. So I came into this family, both sides musical. Grandmother, both sides musical. Grandfather's musical. Parents musical. My brother's musical. My cousin's musical. And really and truly, I've often said this, as far as singers in my family go, I'm not even the best one. Far from it. Like I was saying earlier, my mother got the Holy Ghost. You could not touch her at all. But now my mother would only sing in church, and my father only sang at, family gatherings, in the kitchen at the house, on the carport, to friends and neighbors. None of us were pursuing music. For me, that all started when I went to college. So I left home with the ability to carry a tune. I arrived at Humboldt State University to study to become a teacher. I had thought I'd be a dentist, but I changed my mind about that, and then I thought I'd be a teacher. One night, a friend of mine by the name of Paul Hasselquist and I, who lived, we were dorm mates. They said, "Hey, yeah, we're going down to Garcia's Mexican Cantina. It's $1 beer night. Let's go down there." And, so I just joined the group of guys, and we went down to Garcia's. Turns out that night was also open mic night.
Oh, wow.
And we're sitting there, and it's open mic, and this guy's up there, people are reciting poetry and playing good music and doing different things. We weren't even paying any attention to them. But Paul, my friend, says to our little group, he goes, hey, you guys, Earl can sing. I heard him singing in the shower the other morning. And I was like, what? Yeah, dude, I heard you. And when he sang in Kabira's room, his girlfriend's, some chick's room, dorm room, I just sang along a little bit. Anyway, he goes, you ought to go up there and sing with that guy. And I got horrified. Like suddenly I was just frozen in fear. I can't do it. And they kept saying, no, you should go do it, man. It'd be great. And I go, okay, if you buy me another beer, I'll do it. Well, clearly they bought me another beer. And I went up there and I sang. I didn't know the guy. He says his name's Bryce. I still know him as well. He says, he goes, well, what songs do you know? And I go, I don't know. And he says, what key do you sing in? And I was like, I don't know what key. And he goes, well, here, look on my list and see if you know any of these songs. I looked on his list and I did know one song. It was Something Fine by Jackson Browne from the Saturate Before Using album. And I knew that song because, I don't know if I mentioned to you before, but I'm also a registered dental assistant.
Yes.
And I had been a dental assistant in the Navy, and I used the Navy College Fund to go to university. And while I was in school, I worked part-time as a dental assistant at the Humboldt Open Door Clinic. The doctor, Alan Samuel, would play this Jackson Browne Saturate Before Using cassette every time we did oral surgery. So if someone's gonna have a tooth removed, he would play Jackson Browne as house music. So I knew that whole album really, but I definitely knew Something Fine. And so the first song I ever sang in public on a stage in front of a microphone was The Papers Lie There Helplessly in a Pile Outside Your Door. I've tried and tried, but I just can't remember what they're for. I sang that song, and I knew nothing of stunned silence because, again, I hadn't ever been on a stage before. I finished the song, and nobody applauded. Everybody just, and I said to myself, oh, I guess I guess they don't like me. I must not have done a good job. And I started getting really, really nervous. And suddenly the entire room just erupted in applause. I mean, erupted. And I was, whoa, I did not know how to receive that. Because again, I had never been on stage, but they were just really appreciative of what I did.
Very cool.
And I thought, oh, maybe I could do this. And that was the beginning of the steps toward talking to you today.
And it's a great springboard to my next question, because as I was preparing for this interview, I went out and I stumbled on a story that you had done this project in college and recorded an LP. And I'm one of these guys that if I can find it, I'll find it. And I went on to Discogs and I found a copy of this album. There it is right there, man. And the cool part is it was still sealed.
Yeah.
And it was from a gentleman in San Diego. He shipped it from San Diego day before yesterday, I think it was. I got to hear the story about this. How did that come together, man? I mean, you want to talk about serendipitous.
Yeah,
you want to talk about divine intervention. Tell me about it.
Okay, so I did the open mic, and that was the beginning of me. I started going down there on a regular basis, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That night sparked a thing. I was like, wow, maybe I could do this. But here's the thing. People kept coming up to me saying, oh my God, you're great, you're great. Listen, back home, nobody ever told me that I was great. In fact, like I said, compared to the other singers in my family, I'm not great at all. And so they were all saying, you're great, you're great. And because my thing was, I can't harmonize. I don't harmonize. I can't sing harmony very well. And in my family, if you sing off pitch, that can be dangerous. Like people will hit you. You know, it's like, you're stepping on my note, goddammit. You know, that's not, yeah. So I was kind of insecure about singing, but they kept saying how you're great. And I did like just singing. I wasn't doing this thinking someday I'm going to be Earl Thomas and have a music career. I just liked it. And so I started going pretty much every week. And then I met a guitar player by the name of Dan Perez, who I just saw last Saturday, as a matter of fact.
How cool.
And he was a music major. And Dan said, and Dan and this guy, Mike Whalen, and Mike is the one actually who said, hey, you know, if we could get you to sing in our band, dude, we could play all the frat parties and we could, you know, get gigs. And I go, well, I've never sang in a band before, but I'll do it. So I joined the band, called it Wild Night. And the Van Morrison song was our theme song, his song Wild Night. And so I was singing in the band. We actually did start getting gigs. The first big gig we did was opening for John Lee Hooker at the Old Town Bar and Grill in Eureka.
Wow.
And
that was your first gig.
It was first big gig. We played a few frat parties and we played in the dorms and we played, but then somebody saw us and they go, yeah, you guys should open for John Lee Hooker. So we did. And then Dan Perez, the guitar player that I just saw last Saturday when I was up in Arcata last Saturday, he said to me, he goes, you know, you should change your major to music and you should take voice. It could really help you and improve your voice. And I thought, nah, I don't know if I want to take voice lessons. I might end up sounding like an opera singer. And he goes, well, what's wrong with that? But you know, you don't have to sound like an opera singer. You can use the technique to do whatever you want. And he was right. I ended up changing my major to music with an emphasis on voice. And I learned all of the techniques that allow me, even till today, to be in good voice. Those techniques definitely make a difference. Music major, in our senior year, we were required to do what was called a senior project.
Okay.
And senior project could be anything from an operetta to a symphony piece to a research paper on some composer from the 1600s, or whatever you did, it had to show that you had actually learned something in the music program. So every day at lunchtime, I still like to do this. I used to go to the library, and I just had a hobby where I would just grab a book off the shelf. I wouldn't look at the title or the topic. I would just grab a book and I'd read the first paragraph. And if the first paragraph caught me, I'd read the page. And if I read the page and I liked what I was reading, I'd read the next page. And I discovered thousands of books like that. Okay. So I had found this book called How to Make and Sell Your Own Recording.
Okay.
I read it in the library, put it back on the shelf. We came back to class, and then the topic of the senior project came up. And the thought of doing a operetta, that was kind of interesting. Writing a research paper on, Bach or Beethoven, nah. And I said, oh, you know what? I saw a book in the library called How to Make and Sell Your Own Recording. What if we made an album? My friend Philip Wooten is his name. You'll see his name on the recording. Mm-hmm. Said, well, yeah, let's do it. So we had to petition because it wasn't on the list of topics that we could use. So we had to petition under, the Bach other, make an LP. And they said yes. We got the book and we started with page 1, chapter 1, and we came out with this album. And we wrote all the songs. We hired the graphic designer to do the artwork. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's a young Earl Thomas right there.
Wow.
Before my hair turned white. Um, and so we wrote all the songs. We hired the musicians. We rented the studio. A couple of guys you might know, Zach Zunis, the guitar player who plays with Janova Magnus. He's on this record.
How cool.
Who else? Some other people. Anyway, we followed the instructions. We made the album. We got our box of albums from Rainbow Records in Los Angeles. And if we had stopped at chapter 8, I would be a tenured college professor now.
Holy cow.
But we went to chapter 9. And chapter 9 said, send copies of your album out to different magazines and newspapers, radio stations, anybody that can write something about your album, and you can take a quote for your press kit. And we're like, what's a press kit? Okay, we have no concept of this. But we followed the instructions. We sent copies out. One of those copies landed on the desk of a man called Buddy Blue. Buddy was a pop music critic for the Orange County Weekly up in LA and the San Diego Union Tribune. And Buddy wrote almost a full page article, 2 solid columns, half a page on this album. And the headline read, San Diegan's album, a blues masterpiece.
Wow.
Now, again, we were very naive. We did not know what that meant. We did not know how to receive that. We didn't know how to use that to further anything. We just, oh, wow, look at Mom. I'm in the paper and I'm not, going to jail. And so, we great. Well, Buddy had a deal with Bizarre Straight Records. And that was Herb Cohen and Frank Zappa. And they have a very famous lawsuit. You could Google it. It's a really good story. But Herb Cohen was a big deal in the music business. He discovered Linda Ronstadt and George Duke and so many others. Really, and he chose me as well. Except that I didn't know who he was or what his choosing of me was an indication of. I didn't know. But thankfully, I'd read, what if you get a record deal? Get an attorney, make sure you have an entertainment lawyer to make sure that your publishing and songwriting royalties are all in check. We did that. I took the deal. And they started their wheels turning. And the next thing you know, I'm going from Winston's Beach Club in Ocean Beach to the Montreux Jazz Festival in Switzerland. Wow. And the next thing you know, I'm getting a phone call from Miss Etta James telling me that she likes my song, I Sing the Blues, which came from this album. And she wants to record it. And they took this album, Bizarre Straight, and they repackaged it as Blue Not Blues, my first official worldwide release.
So this album here is actually the first version of Blue Not Blues.
Yes. Blue Not Blues has 2 songs on it that this album does not.
That's something else.
Yeah.
I go on. I want to hear more about the Etta James story. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I got a phone call one afternoon. Hi, Earl. It's Etta James. And I absolutely did not believe it. Okay. I absolutely thought it was my friend Shanita Royster calling me up, playing a trick on me. And I'm like, come on, Shanita, man. I'm trying to take a nap. And then I hear this voice on the other line say, no, it's really Etta. And, Etta had her speaking voice was very similar to her singing voice. She's like a low contralto, alto type of female voice. And something in the way she said, no, this is really Etta. I was like, oh my God, it's really you. And I, in a situation like that, you want to say something intelligent, clever, comical, maybe. I failed 100%. Okay. I was like, oh my God, Miss James, I can't believe I'm talking to you. My mother knew that I was talking to you. She was, because my mother absolutely loved Etta James. Okay. I could tell what kind of mood my mother was in by the Etta James song that was on the radio or on the stereo. If Rather Go Blind was on, it was going to be an interesting night between my mom and my dad. Okay? If Something's Got a Hold on Me was playing, meant it was probably payday and the refrigerator was full and mama would be cooking, frying bacon and sausage and pancakes and dancing at the stove. But Rather Go Blind was the one. All right. And so she called and she said to me, and this was very poignant in my life. This is when I really thought of myself as a songwriter, because prior to this, I didn't think that I was a songwriter. I did write the songs. Philip and I wrote the songs for this album, but I wasn't thinking, I'm going to write songs for others. She said that I'm trying to remember, it's a long time ago. It's a new blues, but it's the blues. It's not an imitation of the blues. And that's actually what got me on the topic of how so many of today's generation are more imitative, more derivative. They're not really coming from source. And she recognized that I was coming from source. And I came from source only because I didn't know anywhere else. I had no place else to come from where I could come. But she recognized that, and she gave me a nice pat on the back and a big feather in my cap as a songwriter. And then Solomon Burke called, and I actually went to the studio with him. He asked me to go to the studio with him to sort of guide him through singing my song. I'm like, dude, you're Solomon Burke. You don't need me, dude. What the fuck? I couldn't even fathom that. And Screaming Jay Hawkins did one.
Wow.
But it all started with Etta James. And Sir Tom Jones does one of my songs. Who else? Sarissa McQueen. Teenie Tucker does I Sing the Blues. Shamika did I Sing the Blues.
Oh, no kidding.
Janova
did it, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Janova did I Won't Be Around. Who else?
You had Will Wild listed.
Yeah, my song. Oh, Will Wild, yes. Will Wild did get me some. So did Sir Tom Jones. Do you know Will?
I do not, no.
Oh man, he's wonderful. He's really something. He's really something. And and I'm always now, my songs are making money for me.
Sure.
They really do. I've been very fortunate, and I'm always looking for another artist. If you hear of anybody that's looking for songs, send them my way. I can think of a few people who need some of my songs, but I won't name any names. But somebody I should be writing for some of these people. But I should. But yeah, it was a great honor. It was a great honor to have this great artist, this great woman, this great representative of our culture choose my song as the opening track. I mean, she could have made it the last track, but it was the first song you hear on The Right Time. And that meant so much. Yeah.
Wow. I'm absolutely just enjoying myself with this conversation. Earl, you call yourself a modern day griot. And I want to flip the page here because I think this is a good place to talk about this. Could you please educate us on this term and how you see yourself in that role?
Yes. I'm going to, forgive me, I'm going to Google the word griot right now and give you that definition. A griot is a West African storyteller, historian, poet, musician, and or praise singer who preserves and shares oral history and culture. Often hereditary, the role of the griot is central to West African societies, serving as a cultural historian, critic, spokesperson who plays music, particularly on instruments like the kora or the ngani, and their narrative often blends traditional and contemporary styles. I am a griot. And as I mentioned, I come from a family who descends from that proud tradition. I did not consider myself a griot until it was really the last 10 years that I came across that word. But I also noticed that for many, many, many years prior to coming across the word, I was never comfortable with with being called an entertainer. It always bothered me. It always bothered me that people would compare me to the Blues Music Award winners. and say, oh yeah, you should be on the Blues Music Awards. And I'm like, why would I do that? That doesn't resonate with me at all. You can't give a person an award for falling off of a log. And so, and not only that, I already have the accolade. I have the praise of my family and my ancestry. There's no award for that. There's no award that can even equal that.
Right.
And so, and I could never, I didn't have vocabulary to explain why that topic or that putting me into that sort of light, maybe it always made me uncomfortable. But now I understand, because I'm not an entertainer. What I do as a griot may be considered by some as entertaining. Someone might enjoy watching me make my connection to spirit and to ancestry and to source, but I'm not doing that for praise.
Understood.
In the same light, I cannot accept criticism. Like if somebody were to say, oh, Earl Thomas, he's not, who cares? That has nothing to do with me. And I am, especially with the new gospel record, the live at Ronnie Scott's, or live in London, recorded at Ronnie Scott's. I bring that tradition completely together in one place, in London at the iconic venue, Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club, where everybody who is anybody has performed. To name just a few, the late, great Jeff Beck just did a recording there. But B.B. King, Tina Turner, Lady Gaga did a performance there, Prince. But if you want to go back farther, Miles Davis, Curtis Mayfield, Nina Simone, Ella Fitzgerald, the greats, Count Basie, the greats of the greats have performed at this place. So it was always a dream of mine and a goal of mine to do a show there and to record there. That's a pivotal moment in my life. But on the gospel show that I do with the gospel ambassadors featuring Sister Leola is the three singing ladies that work with me.
Yes.
So I read a Ticketmaster critique of my show. Somebody wrote, quote, I didn't care for the Earl Thomas gospel show. It's just gospel with a bluesy beat, unquote. And I said, oh my God, that's exactly what it is. I'm going to use that. So he thought he was criticizing me. You think you're going to hurt my feelings? Fuck you.
He was giving you more ammunition.
Dude, thank you for that. I gave me something to call. What can I call this? It's gospel with a bluesy beat, but the blues never felt this good. And that music is a complete combination of my father's blues and my mother's gospel in me.
And I have to tell you, as somebody who was raised in an apostolic background with lots of gospel in the air, I've listened to this album. As a matter of fact, I listened to it today preparing for the interview. And so many of those songs resonate with me because it takes me back to those early days when I was growing up and the church songs. And, oh man, I really, and I'm not saying this because you're here, I genuinely enjoyed that album. And it's one of those things that I'll listen to on occasion when I get in the mood for it. And I love it.
Right on. Mission accomplished. It's funny because when I'm going to share with you a letter that I'm going to release. I wrote this to my mom because my mom always told me that I was a gospel singer. Yeah. And I said, no, I want to be Rod Stewart. I like me sing. I like those gospel songs, but I don't know. And I finally did it after all these years. I finally did it. And I did sing in church a few times. Like at my grandma's funeral, I sang at her funeral. And every once in a while, they could coax me out, but it was very rare. But I wrote this to my mom, and this is going to go out with the release. Dear Mama, you always said that I was a gospel singer. You taught me the songs and never let me forget from where they and we came. Pikeville, Tennessee, in the heart of Sequatchie Valley at the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains. Today, your birthday, I want to honor you with the release of Live in London, my first live gospel album. I sang all of your favorites, including your signature 12 Gates to the City. I think you would be proud of the work that the gospel ambassador, Sister Leola, and I have done, and you would really appreciate how the crowd in London responded. So happy birthday, Mama. Here's your special gift from me. Make sure you tell Daddy and Tim and Papa and Granddaddy and Mom Bear and Daddy Coy, Uncle Nay, Jim Sam, Aunt Jolly, and Aunt Mimi, and all the rest. I'll see you soon. Love always, Goody. That was my nickname.
How beautiful.
And this record represents my entire family and our entire history. And these songs are extremely important to our family's history. As when we spoke earlier, I had mentioned that, the blues and gospel were the only free speech of the African American during Jim Crow. The only self-expression they had was in blues music and gospel. The devil at the crossroads that Robert Johnson is singing about is not the devil with horns and shit. It's the Ku Klux Klan. Because in Robert Johnson's day, that's all that existed. Your sharecropping and the Klan. And if he was going to beg for anything, he was begging for his life, not to be lynched. Because in those days, Black people could be eliminated without a thought and without consequences. And so the only expression they had was in their music. So the blues and gospel come from the same, they're like fraternal twins. Same seed, two different eggs in the same womb.
Sure.
And and a lot of people like to say that, that the gospel came from slavery, and it did not. Gospel and blues came after 1872 during Reconstruction, when the Jim Crow laws were passed and Black people lost all of their civil rights. And, come on, you couldn't use a public toilet. You couldn't use, to the day he died, whenever we would go on a family outing, my dad would always go to the bathroom. And we used to make a joke about it. Like, look, Daddy's, there he goes. Before we left the house, he would always go to the bathroom. And he never said why, but I figured it out one day. It's because back in his day, when you were going to go out away from home, you had to make sure you didn't have to go to the bathroom in public. Because if you did, you might not be able to find a place that would accommodate you.
Sure.
And this was just the reality. From 1872, that's when the first Jim Crow laws were passed. So from 1872 to 1972, it was, if you lived in Mississippi, dude, it was bad. Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, it was bad. It could be very bad. It could be life-ending bad. And so how else were these human beings going to express themselves and stay alive? It was in this music. I do hope that people will not forget what I just said, or that they will at least educate themselves about what I just said. It's out there. You can find the information. It's there.
Well, and sadly, I don't normally like to throw in a whole lot of my input on an interview, but part of our program at work is we get educated. The inclusion and diversity department comes in and does programs. And we had a program where somebody came in and talked about sundown towns.
Oh yeah, sundown. That's what I'm saying. Robert Johnson would never have been out after dark. And if he was,
I am blown away that sundown towns still are allowed to exist today.
Yeah.
And I'm not pandering. I'm disgusted because I don't understand, and I never will understand because I'm not a Black man. Okay.
Yeah.
But
well, we don't understand either, but it's the way it is. It's not everywhere. And there are places like that still exist. Yeah.
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 Yeah,
I would,
it blew my mind.
yeah, I personally don't know of any places like that, but I will say that luckily for me, because my dad was in the Navy, right? Now,
Hmm.
being the Navy's not a big Fortune 500 gig, but the one thing that his being in the Navy did for me and my brothers is it took us out of the environment where that narrative, the narrative that says white people are superior and black people are inferior, it took us out of that environment completely. We grew up in Navy housing on base, so there was no racism. It's impossible to have racism. Why is that? Because, dude, you're surrounded by Japanese and Chinese and Filipino and black and white and Australian and New Zealand. And I grew up with Koreans and Guamanians and I mean, the playground where we played was literally the world. And there was no room for any little, white supremacist kids to come out there and start talking that shit. It wouldn't have worked. So from age 3 to 14 years old, I only knew an international experience. My kindergarten teacher was Chinese, right? My, from kindergarten to the ninth grade, I had Korean, Japanese, Chinese, Guamanian, Filipino, Cambodian, Anglo, Black, New Zealand, friends. You go to their house and their mom cooks for you, and they come to your house and your mom cooks for them. And you go to my Japanese guy's house and you're eating fried rice and tempura, and they come to your house and he's eating cornbread and pinto beans. And it's like, we had this beautiful international experience, and our schools were international schools, which also aids in the self-confidence, because I grew up from kindergarten. We had a balancing beam and monkey bars, and these are all confidence building toys for kids,
Sure.
Personality building on the playground, so that headspace, that whole racism headspace, that did not apply. When we moved back to Tennessee, I was such an oddball, dude. They'd never seen a black boy like me, a black boy with absolute self-confidence and self-esteem, who had a world view, right? Because
Yeah.
I had been places, you know what I mean? Most of the kids that I went to school with, all of them, none of them had ever been anywhere. They'd never left Pikeville. I'd been to Guam and Hawaii and the Philippines and Japan and San Diego and Bremerton, Seattle, Jacksonville. I'd been on the island of Tinian and Saipan when we were on Guam. I mean, I had been places. I'd seen some things. And so that that created I was an oddball, to say the least.
Well, you
I'm
stood
sorry.
out a little bit.
I got off topic. Sorry.
No, you're fine. But listen, we talked about Live in London, which
Yeah.
just got released recently.
Yeah.
Goodbye,
Today.
the single
Oh.
that you shared with me. Goodbye, the video. Talk about powerful.
Yeah.
But you tell me that Goodbye is part of a different project you're working on. Can
Yeah.
you talk about that at all?
Sure. The great thing about Earl Thomas is that I have my hands in several pies. So
Okay.
there's the Live in London, that's an Earl Thomas project. The Live at Biscuits and Blues and Live in San Francisco, that's another Earl Thomas project. The song Goodbye is part of telling a new story, quote, telling a new story about the blues, unquote. And that's French they live in Switzerland, but these two French producers found me because in 2019, I thought I was going to retire from music, and I did retire. But looking back, I really just took a break after 27 years, but I needed
All right,
break.
wait a minute. Well, you can't just say that and move on. I was going to ask you the question and I held back. You can go back to your story in a minute. What caused you to consider stepping away from music, be it a short break or a long break, and what brought you back?
Okay, in all honesty,
Yes, sir.
okay, I felt that I was a fraud.
How so?
I woke up one morning, I felt that I was a fraud when it occurred to me that the blues and gospel were the only free speech of the African American, and that the music they made, the notes that they sang, the melodies that they presented was their absolute soul crying out in pain from life oppression. We're not talking about can't get a cab in New York City. We're talking about your entire life is not allowed to thrive, nor are your children's lives. My grandparents never truly saw the freedom. My grandparents and parents received the right to vote in their adult life.
Wow.
My grandparents would have been in their 60s. My parents would have been in their 20s when they got the right to vote. When I realized what the blues, and I'm not talking about W.C. Handy's blues, but blues that all these blues music award winners and shit with all that they're imitating, trying to sound like and trying to get those notes like and trying to make those melodies like, that is genuine life pain expressed through music by people who were so completely marginalized. It's uncomparable in any other, genre, right? And I realized that while I have a musical vocabulary from having grown up in this world of music, and
Yes,
this was the music that was played in our house, I can sing a certain way that sounds, I hate this word, authentic. I was very, very disturbed that I too participated in this falsehood, because none of us have suffered like that.
right.
And people are, I told one artist, don't get up there and accept your blues music award, get to crying and shit and thanking people for this award. Don't get up there and start crying and being all, full of gratitude. You got the reward that you get is from your ancestors. And when I realized that I too was faking it, it really bothered me. It really did. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to continue doing this. But I didn't want to say publicly what I just told you. I didn't want to say it out loud. So I said, I'm just retiring because, all that touring is a young man's game. No, it's only because I felt like I was a fraud. I was a fraud. And then I had 3 years off to think about it and reinvent myself. And I came up with the gospel experience. And I realized that I can sing for real. That's coming from the heart, my heart. And it's connected to my lineage. The French guys contacted me and said, we are looking for an authentic American blues man to sing on a project we're working on. And I said, well, I'm retired, but if you tell me about the project, maybe I can recommend someone. And he said, in broken English, he said, well, we want to tell, this is a quote, we want to tell a new story about the blues. And I was like, ding, 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 ding. Dude, what did you just say? Because that is exactly what I want to do. That's exactly what I've been trying to do. But I had surrounded myself with too many people who were, instead of telling a new story about the blues, they're telling the same old story about the blues in some diluted version of it, right? Some watered down version of it. Some people are really good imitators at it, but anyway, I decided that those French guys said the magic words, and I says, okay, what do you need from me? They said, we'll provide the music tracks, you provide the lyrics. And we did, I didn't tell you about this, but I do have a CD called Cold Ghetto. And those 6 songs, that EP, are the first songs that I did with the French guys. And then we did Goodbye. And I've got another one called 4th of July, which is going to blow your mind when you hear it.
Mm.
It's my full-on autobiography. It's the whole story in one song. But when they said that, we want to tell a new story about the blues, I'm all in, man, really. Because I can no longer play this imitation game where I'm going to do an Albert King song and then do some fucking bullshit, version of it. Or go, I want to do this song, but I'm going to play a funk version of Hoochie Coochie Man, you know, and then they go, oh yeah, you know, dude, that's wrong. That's so wrong. And a lot of times the reason people do these versions of the song, because they can't play like that. And you know why you can't play like that? Because you didn't suffer like that. Because what that playing is the reflection of the suffering they endured. And if you didn't suffer, you know, and I don't care if you're Irish or Jewish, nobody had it worse than the slaves and the sharecroppers. Okay, nobody. Okay, maybe the Native Americans did. They weren't. Yeah, they were eliminated pretty much. But the sharecroppers had it really bad. And so when why did I come back? The French guys motivated me. Oh, well, okay, I take that back. I said to them, I'll write the songs, but I'm not going to promote anything. I'm not going to tour. I'm not going to get involved in any advertising or anything. But I'll write these songs. And I did. And then they kept calling. And then I went to Switzerland and we filmed the video. What really got me to get off my ass and get back on stage, I met a young man by the name of Anthony Cullins. Anthony Cullins, Cullins. Look him up. This young man is literally one of the most talented guitar players I have ever personally known. And if I say Anthony Cullins in the same breath as Carlos Santana and Jimi Hendrix, I would not be kidding. Wow. And I know those are fighting words. I know what I just said.
Wow.
I said Jimi Hendrix and Carlos Santana. Okay? I said it. This guy is a prodigy. I mean, he's going to blow the doors off everybody you've ever heard of in today's generation. Sit down, Joe Bonamassa. Sit the fuck down. Anthony Cullins is in the house. Okay? He's right there, man. And so a friend of mine invited me to be on her podcast. And I thought I was going on to talk about my retirement, right? And she said, well, you know, if you're going to be on the podcast, you need to do 2 songs. And I go, oh man, you know, I've been out of the loop for 3 years. I don't know any musicians anymore. You know, I don't, you know, I don't know about that. And she goes, well, maybe the young man who's going on after you would accompany you. I'm like, okay, who's that? Anthony Cullins. Well, I actually knew him a little bit because of a conversation that I'd had with him and his dad a few months earlier. And I go, yeah, okay, I know Anthony. So she put it together. Anthony and I did 2 songs. And when we got together to rehearse that first day over here in the park near my house, on a picnic table, something it was like everything just reversed. And all of a sudden I had this overwhelming feeling, oh, this is real. This is really real, man. And so Anthony and I started doing work together, and he's on the when on that gospel record on the first song, when you hear me go, Anthony, that's him.
Okay.
Playing that song. Right. So check it out. You'll hear him. He can fucking play, man. And I mean, and he's not imitating. Here's the thing. A lot of musicians, a lot of these, we'll call them modern day blues artists, I can tell that they're not coming from source. What they're coming from is they memorized a bunch of notes off of some recording, some B.B. King record or some, you know, whatever album. And they're just regurgitating or trying to regurgitate what they heard on these records. And some of them are very expert at it. You know, they really make these combinations, and but it's a very intellectual process. Anthony Cullins is coming from this. He's coming from source. He really is, man. He's coming. His soul is on the line for real. He is not there to have you go, oh, you're great. You sound so authentic. He ain't there. None of that applies to him. He is just that good. And he's 22 years old. And while I don't normally associate with such young people, this guy's he's 22, but his fucking spirit is 1,000 years. I mean, he is
old
just
soul. Yeah.
So yes, absolutely. And so we started working together. I've taken him to Norway, England. We're going to Denmark later this year. We're going to Switzerland later this year. And I'm presenting him on certain stages to introduce him to on the world stage, because he's really, it's something special. And so he motivated me. And then the gospel thing, that came again, another, accident. I got a phone call from a restaurant here in San Diego called Humphreys, and they do a brunch, Humphreys world famous Sunday brunch. And she called and says, "We want to do a gospel brunch. Would you put a show together, a band together?" And I said, "I'm retired, And then she kept calling. She called me 4 times over the course of a year. And finally I said, "Okay, I'll do it on one condition. If I can find the right orchestra, I'll do it. Here's what's not going to happen. I'm not going to call up a bunch of blues guys, blues musicians, and say, here, go learn these. Here's a recording. Go learn these songs. I ain't doing that." I knew a couple of guys who play in church, who grew up in church, whose parents were in church. And I called them, and then I called another guy, and then they knew. So I put together a group of church gospel musicians who all grew up in church.
Wow.
Whose parents were in church. They live out here, but their parents came from Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas. You know what I mean? They brought the culture, the pinto beans and the cornbread and the fried chicken came with them. And we put this group together, and it worked from the first show. And then all of a sudden people started calling, and the next thing you know, we're at the No Child and Blues Festival presenting the show. And then we got Ronnie Scott's, and for the EFG London Jazz Festival. And then we were requested to come back to Ronnie Scott's just last April. We were just there.
Wow. In
August, we're going to do a residency at Ronnie Scott's. We'll do a week, and we'll start a tour. We did a short tour in the UK in April, and we're going to do a longer one in 2016. We're going to Switzerland in December. Wow. It just started. And so with that, things started to work. But you see, now I don't feel a phony. I don't. I know this gospel is talking to the ancestors. I know that. I can feel it. And I know that what Anthony Collins and I are doing is also coming from that source. And I can present with him. And, there's that line from Lord of the Rings where Theoden says, "I can now go to my ancestors and stand with them and be proud." And that's how I feel. I can now stand with my ancestors and be proud with this music that I've created. And that does not a Blues Music Award make. You dig?
Yeah.
So,
Earl, this has been an incredible discussion. Where can people go to get more information about you, your music, maybe buy some merch or albums, or book you for a gig, man?
Oh yeah. And you know what? And I'm a cheap date. Okay. I'm not that cheap. Okay, I don't gouge. That's the one thing I don't ever gouge. I just, I know what our salary is, and we're very reasonable. EarlThomasMusic.com. 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 I heard that you have to say it 3 times so that people they'll retain it. So EarlThomasMusic.com.
And we are going to put it in, we'll put it into the notes when we put the episode up. But Earl Thomas, it has been such a pleasure, man. I thank you very much for taking time and joining me today on Time Signatures. And I truly hope to catch you in or near Michigan soon.
Thank you. And I appreciate your show. And thank you for giving me a chance to speak and express myself. It's great.
Thank you so much.
It's my honor to be here.
Well, as this episode comes to a close, I want to tell you about the Killer Blues Headstone Project. Stephen Salter started Killer Blues in 2008 with the goal of making sure that no blues musician lay in an unmarked grave. To date, the Killer Blues Headstone Project has purchased and placed nearly 200 headstones in close to 20 states. But there's a lot more work to do. In fact, Stephen has already compiled a list of 25 more headstones in need of funding and placement, and he needs your help to get it done. Whether it's $5, $50, $500 or more, every dollar raised goes for this worthwhile project. Please consider making a tax-deductible donation today at killerblues.net. Look for the donation link at the bottom of the page. And as always, thank you so much for your consideration. And that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures. Once again, my esteemed thanks to my guest, Earl Thomas, but also to you, for without you, none of this would be possible. Keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility. That's what I tell you. But preserving the history of the blues, one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long, everybody.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.